If you can bounce back from something difficult in your life, that's resilience. And that is Arvada. A year and a half ago, the Arvada Resiliency Taskforce kicked into gear to help our businesses during COVID. We're looking back at what worked and why and how we're positioned to move forward. Joining me at the wonderful Schoolhouse Kitchen and Libations is Daniel Ryley from the Arvada Economic Development Association and Cammie Welch from our incredible Chamber of Commerce. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Tell us how this task force came together.
Absolutely. So when the news of COVID-19 started to rattle our community and our state, it was an ideal opportunity for partners to come together. And so we moved quickly. It was actually a meeting in the basement with a few partners saying, what's happening? How do we help make this better for our businesses and our community holistically? So we decided to align, and the Monday following those announcements, were on a call that morning talking about what did our businesses need, how did we support them, and we continued to meet daily for weeks and weeks as we navigated those initial phases of COVID-19.
And I think it's important to note that the reason we were able to come together so quickly and so effectively was because we had these existing relationships and existing trust, a very organic strategic partnership between all the players that came together to form that Resiliency Task Force. And I think when we realized the gravity of the situation we were in, it was just inherent for us to step up and say, what can we all do to work together? We all understand the roles that we play. We all understand each other's strengths. How can we spin this into something that will really be valuable for our business community?
What I love about Arvada are the partnerships and how nimble we are and how quickly we respond. How much money was invested into the community and how did the businesses react to that?
Yeah, so as many folks know, there were funds that came down through the federal government called the CARES Act. And the city of Arvada was very thoughtful in how it thought about where those funds needed to go. And it really leaned into the Arvada Resiliency Task Force and its leaders to help them understand what is the need in the business community, what is the need with the nonprofit community, and how can these funds most effectively be optimized. And so the city ended up diverting, or I shouldn't say diverting, but the city ended up contributing $5.6 million towards business and economic recovery. And a lot of that manifested in programs that were rolled out through the Resiliency Task Force and its partners, as well as a significant amount through the city's grant program, which, as you know, Mayor, started as forgivable loans, and we realized that we could turn that into grants, and we could kind of refuel that program to continue helping more and more businesses. And at the end of that program, I believe, and excuse me, I'll just check my my notes here. I think it was 4.3 million was dedicated towards grants and loans for businesses.
Cammie, how did the businesses react?
It was amazing. The feedback from businesses was outstanding. We have businesses that have called and said because of the work of the Resiliency Task Force, they're still in business. And those are the stories that are powerful and aligned. And I think to Daniel's point, that investment of the CARES funding was impactful because it was driven from feedback. It was driven from that true understanding of what our businesses needed. We were doing focus groups and surveys and really working to understand exactly what they needed during that time to align PPE and those resources that would help them thrive. So I think that's really impactful.
How would you rate the success of the task force?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it 100. It's amazing, and I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it's absolutely incredible to me what happens when partnerships are formed and are consistent, and that consistency really helped us to drive forward in a really efficient way. And so when there was a new idea, we didn't all have to go back and have separate conversations about it. We were able to move in a matter of moments on this call because everybody was together having those conversations. So the amount of programs and resources that were rolled out were huge. It was amazing. And so it was really cool to see the power of that collaboration.
Yeah, and I think if we were just to look at data as some sort of indicator of how well we could rate the outcomes of this partnership, we could rate it very high. I mean, extremely high. If we just looked at alone the net change in brick and mortar businesses that we have in our entire community, entire city of Arvada, that number actually went up. It increased by 3.5%. So there was over 2,200 brick and mortar established businesses in the city prior to the pandemic. And imagine of some of the fallout that we did have, that number on a net level actually increased quite significantly. And I think if we were to just look around anecdotally, it's really hard to find a business that we can say went out of business or completely shut their doors because of COVID. There were some businesses turning over prior to COVID that kind of transpired during that time frame, but it's really hard for us to point to a specific business that couldn't get some level of support that needed it to keep them going throughout this pandemic. So I think if you look at that information, it's easy to rate our success as high. I think if, to Cammie's point as well, if we look at just the speed of delivery, it was incredible. I don't think we've ever seen, and especially if we look around to benchmark our community against others across the country, the ability for the community and strategic partners, nonprofits, and the local governments to come together that quickly, make decisions that quickly, and get the resources and the help out the door and into the places it needs to be. And for that, I think, to Cammie's excitement, you could rake it much higher than a 10 out of 10.
So you're not just going to live on your laurels and satisfy yourselves with the success you've had. The task force is continuing to move forward, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And early on this year, as we felt like maybe things were starting to slow down with the need for response to COVID, we had a conversation and said, wow, this has been impactful for all these partners to be together. And there probably will be opportunities in the future for us to continue to work together. So while we weren't meeting as frequently over the start of this year, there have been challenges this year that our community has faced that has brought us back together in a more frequent meeting. And having that infrastructure in place has been incredible. No matter what we're dealing with as a community, this group of leaders is committed to making sure that Arvada and our businesses are as resilient as possible.
Yeah, I second that. The keyword there is that infrastructure. It's very important that we remember what worked through this process. And what we learned is that it's very replicable and it's very scalable. And when we think about any other needs that the community has, and it doesn't even have to be, I believe, the business community, it could be the greater community, it could be our residents, it could be nonprofits, wherever we see a need, wherever there are external forces pressing against our community and creating challenges, we can take that infrastructure that was created through the Resiliency Taskforce and replicate it and say, who are the players and the leaders that need to be at the table and listening to the community and responding. Another thing I think Cammie did a wonderful job of that we need to make sure people understand is the feedback loops that were created. The ability for the task force to listen to what the community's needs were and have eyes and ears throughout the entire city and getting that information quickly back to the task force leaders so that we could then make decisions and then provide those decisions or options back to the community and say, what do you think about what's happening? Are we going in the right direction? And constantly having that feedback loop is part of that critical infrastructure that I think can be replicated and will serve the community for a long time.
Well, an unfortunate but great example of the Resiliency Task Force were the horrible events in June that took the lives of Officer Gordon Beasley and Johnny Hurley. And the task force immediately came together, not to save the vitality of the economics of Old Town, but to address the needs of our employers, our employees, and the citizens. Talk about that a little.
Yeah, it was a difficult moment for everybody, but the power of coming together was really amazing. And Jefferson Center for Mental Health joined us on the task force during that time, as did other partners that typically weren't in the COVID response calls. But again, we had that infrastructure for them to easily hop on and be part of those discussions. So we were able to move quickly to get out those resources to those who needed them most.
Yeah, I participated in those calls, and to see the compassion and the efforts that were being made to help us start to heal, truly resiliency. So we've heard from a lot of our businesses in terms of the feedback that they've given us about the task force. Let's hear from them. Boy, is it great to hear that feedback and how much this program has impacted our community. Daniel and Cammie, I want to thank you so much. You are exemplify the partnerships that we're so proud of here in the city of Arvada. Thanks for what you do each and every day.
Thank you.
I'm Arvada Mayor Marc Williams. There's no question that together we're stronger and can take on anything. I can't wait.